Why this timing for Israel's escalation on the Lebanon front? There's still debates as to whether Israel's infiltration of the Hezbollah comm systems, the mass maiming pager attack, whether that was about to be found out and had to be launched at that moment. Once it was launched, followed with the walkie-talkie attack, the sense is that this is the kind of tech intel success in Israeli terms that doesn't come along very often. It needs to be built over many, many, many years to put those fake companies to infiltrate that system. Therefore, once that was done, Israel looked to push home the advantage. The assassination of Nasrallah, the removal of some of the command operatives, other personnel taken out of commission in that attack, injured, killed. Therefore, Israel, it seems premeditatedly, made the decision that if you do that, then see if you can push home that advantage. Eventually, the leadership and the cadre and the fighters will be replenished. If you're convinced that you've significantly degraded that, then this, as they saw it, was the time to go after the missile stocks, the infrastructure in the south, underground, and so that's what they did. But what about the bigger picture? That's the immediate, but the bigger picture for the timing of this escalation. And here I think one looks to a few factors. First of all, it's coming up on the 1 year. In that time, and against the backdrop of the colossal devastation wrought upon Gaza, the destruction, the killing, the displacement, what has not been achieved is that thing Netanyahu held out for and was never going to achieve. This idea of total victory, total dismantling of Hamas. Hamas stood strong. Israel hadn't restored its deterrence posture or this myth of the powerful Israel. And this was seen, given that they knew they had that infiltration on the Hezbollah front, this was seen as the opportunity to do so. Do it on that front, not on the Gaza front. But there were other factors, because this was a confluence of things. And one of them is that the attempt to restore this sense of Israeli power aligns with Netanyahu's personal, political, and ideological needs. Netanyahu, hoping that his path back to political saliency and survival is via being the indispensable wartime leader. For that, you need to keep going, expanding war and have something successful. Personally, of course, it's his get out of jail card. And ideologically, if you can seriously degrade the axis of resistance challenge posed to you, then you can continue in less constrained circumstances down this path of trying to vanquish, displace, remove the Palestinians. Netanyahu also saw that this was perhaps a unique opportunity inside Israel with a mobilized society behind these military actions. The political Zionist opposition in parliament not only did not oppose the expansion of the terrain to Lebanon, but were actually pushing for it. That's what Gantz, for those familiar with them, Golan, the head of Labour, they were all saying, go after, do Lebanon. And Israel had tested, over the course of the past year, the question of were there any red lines as far as the US is concerned, and the answer came back unequivocally. Israel can not only get away with anything, but the US will continue to send forces to the region, send warships, back Israel up, not just with weapons and political diplomatic cover, but with active intel and involvement, not just defensive, but also offensive in Israel's war effort. This is America's war, not just Israel's war, even to the extent, and we don't know for sure yet, but just before Israel escalates massively in Lebanon, the US manages to corral its allies to put out a statement, not just calling for a 21-day pause, but it's telling us in briefings on the record by US officials that they've got it. The 21-day pause is locked in. It's about to be announced by the parties. Were the Americans duped? Were they intentionally misleading and misdirecting at Israel's behest? We don't know, but we do know that Israel was confident it had the US exactly where it wanted it. What next? How far does this go in Lebanon? Well, the Dahiyeh doctrine of the use of force in a civilian area, civilian infrastructure, not drawing that distinction, that was started in 2006, and that's the southern Beirut neighborhood. In many respects, Beirut is both prologue and epilogue now to what we have seen in Gaza over the last years. So Israel feels it can get away with this, and we already see the destruction across significant parts of Lebanon. Increasingly, that's going to and is including civilian infrastructure. We've seen hospitals being evacuated. We have 20% of the Lebanese population displaced. That would be the equivalent of 13 million Brits or 60 million Americans. That's one part of what we see going on. What about, though, these ground incursions? And if you look at the Israeli commentary, it's interesting because the military analysts, clearly being briefed by at least parts of the security establishment, are giving the warning, let's not drink our own Kool-Aid in terms of the extent of the damage that has been inflicted on Hezbollah, the idea that Hezbollah is now totally incapacitated. You go in on the ground and it will be painful. And that's already been seen in the very brief and limited incursion on the ground that's taken place so far. So that's a warning not to do it, because that's where Hezbollah, and there is a sense that the units have operational autonomy and they're still sufficiently intact. That's where attrition comes in. But despite some, at least, knowing a bit of their history, the social political dynamic inside Israel and the bar again, these bars that the Israeli leadership set for themselves of total quiet, total removal, only then can the northern residents who have been evacuated, 60,000 approximately, return to their homes. It's a bar that when you have no politics and you only rely on the military, and Israel has no politics because it has no diplomatic plan to offer, is almost, and very probably is, unattainable. But because of this dynamic towards we can do it, maximalism, no diplomacy, the likelihood is that they will go in deeper, despite the fact that they should know better. So what we are left with is the bleak prospect that at least some, and perhaps much of what we've seen in Gaza, could yet be inflicted on Lebanon. And Gaza and what's happening in Gaza, destruction in the West Bank, provocations on Al-Aqsa, none of that stops. And one of the things one's hearing from people in Lebanon is that this feels like what the no red lines future of a tech, AI, robotics-driven warfare against civilians looks like.